Okay, good evening everybody and welcome to session 1 of P7 revision. Now I hate to start a class on a bad note, but I'm feeling extremely unwell. We're going to have to go for this because cancellation is not really an option, but we may find that I have to take repeated breaks during this evening's class, otherwise I may not get to the end of it. But who knows, once we get going, maybe my passion for P7 will zoom us through to the end. Anyway, I shall do my best for you, as always. Okay, so this is session 1 of the P7 Advanced Audit and Assurance Revision. Since I am pretty sure one or two of you are going to raise this, I will answer the questions now before the questions arise. Let me just tell you what is happening. There are some things that you are waiting for me to upload. The person who does the uploading has not been in the office today. I have sent them the Summary of Audit Standards, the ISAs, so that's done. I have sent them, what else have I sent them? The study planner for these 4 revision sessions, showing what we'll be covering in each of the 4 evenings, and I'll go through that quickly with you now. The questions we are going to be doing, etc., etc. So that is all done. Progress test questions, yep, all done. The must, should, could list is sort of done, in that it's done handwritten, and it's done because on the study planner, when you see that, there will be questions we will do in class and then other recommended questions. And the other recommended questions are taken from the musts and most of the shoulds. So you do have question recommendation, but the must, should, could list will also, assuming she is back tomorrow, be uploaded. So we're almost there, folks. It's taking me a while, but we're almost there. Okay, we have got 4 sessions of revision. They last from 6 p.m. until 8:45, so 2 hours 45 minutes. As you'll know from the tuition phase, when we have 2 hours, my intention is to go all the way through without a break to give you as much bang for your buck as we can possibly give you. 2 hours and 45 minutes is pushing it a lot, not just for me, I mean I can keep going for days, but also for you guys to take a little break. So during our 2 hours and 45 minutes in our 4 sessions, I will be taking a break in the middle. Now, as I said, I'm not feeling great tonight, so if necessary I might do it in 2 smaller breaks. We'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Okay, let's just give you a rough little idea first of all of what we're going to be covering. Hello! Always love the beginning of revision. We start to see a few new faces appearing. Good to see quite a few of you though. This is good. Okay, so here is the plan. As I said, we have got 4 sessions of revision. Obviously tonight is class number 1. I have to admit, off the top of my head, I don't remember the dates and I don't have the study planner uploaded, but I do know that class 1 obviously is now. Class 2 is on Friday the 31st. Oh, okay. That was a bit bizarre. My screen just went off, but hopefully that won't happen again. Just to answer the question, I think I just answered it, Eleni. I think you've missed the answer by 30 seconds. The person who uploads stuff was not in the office today to do that. She's not in the same building as me, so I can't find someone else to do it. But study planner submitted, progress test submitted, audit standards things submitted. So it's all going to be up hopefully tomorrow. It is done. My apologies. Just it takes a long time. Anyway, we are getting there. So let's get on with this. So class 1 now, class 2 on Friday. I think the other 2 are both next week, aren't they? Or one of them's next week, one that I honestly can't remember. And I don't have the plan in front of me, so I can't tell you. No problem, just ask and you shall receive. But let me just give you a guide as to how things then work. We've got 4 sessions, I'll talk you through them in a minute. There is also a mock examination for you to have a go at. 7th and 12th, thank you, Sue. Now, I'm not quite sure why, but the screen in front of me keeps switching itself off. I don't think that's going to cause you any problems. It might cause me 1 or 2. Not entirely sure why. Possibly a little connection issue, but we will carry on regardless, and hopefully all will be okay. Excuse me. There is a mock exam. The mock exam opens up for you to attempt in a 1-week window, and I do remember when this is, because the window opens on the 10th, so just before our final class, and lasts from 1 week up until the 17th. When you can attempt the mock and submit it, and I get to mark them, yay! And I should make it very clear that when I mark the mocks, I mark them real exam standard. If you pass it, it means you are good enough. If you don't, it means you're not good enough in terms of that mock. And it will be covered in comments and advice on how to improve. Now, of course, before we get into the revision proper, I will be reminding you of the key things you need to do and practice to pass this exam. But first, here is roughly what we plan to do in the 4 classes. So today is class number 1, and as you can probably guess, we will be focusing even on ethical and professional issues, with a bit of practice management included in there as well. Class numero 2 will be mostly looking at planning and audit, and therefore, of course, risk. Now, that is the biggest question on the exam, question 1, the big 35 marker. So even if we do a couple of those questions, we're eating up a lot of time. But included in class 2, we will end up seeing a little bit about matters and evidence, so sort of audit procedures, audit work type questions as well. Class number 3 will continue with the matters and evidence stuff. I am Mr. Unhealthy this term. It's a disaster. Plus, we will also be getting into finalisation and audit reports. And then in our 4th class, we will continue with finalisation reports and non-audit assignments. Oh dear, oh dear. Now, of course, in amongst those 4 sessions, those are all the big, juicy, meaty topics with loads of marks. I will also be dipping in with a bit of technical revision to cover all those little bits and pieces, the audit standards, for example. What else? Some current issues, of course, that pop up as we go through the course. So that is the basic plan. I'll be spreading the audit standard revision throughout the 4 sessions in order to break things up a bit. We do a lot of question practice on a P7 revision course because it's practical, it's the nature of it, and that makes it quite tough, so breaking it up with a little technical revision makes a lot of sense. Of course, if at any point you want to ask any questions, please feel free. Looking at the names here tonight, some of you, quite a few of you, I recognise from the teaching phase, but often on revision we get a few additional people joining in as well. So if we've not met before, hello. Feel free to type in questions whenever you like. Let's begin. Firstly, a reminder that the exam, question 1, is the big 35 marker. It will almost certainly include 4 professional marks. And when we start doing question 1s, which won't be tonight by the way, it will be class number 2, we'll need to start thinking about how we might try to earn those 4 professional marks, or at least some of them. And typically, question 1 is an audit plan and therefore is going to include the topic of risk. Question 2 will be 25 marks. Question 2, to be honest, could be anything. However, the most common topics tend to be non-audit assignments. So you know the sort of thing, due diligence, forensics, looking at social environmental reporting and how to give opinions on that, giving opinions on forecasts, prospective financial information. That tends to be the most common topic in there. But question 2 on the exam is the one that she tends to play around with the most, which is a little annoying because these 2, of course, are compulsory. But at least on question 1, we know what that's likely to be because she is very repetitive. And then questions 3, 4 and 5, and as I've said to you right at the start of the tuition phase, she doesn't have to stick to this, it's just that she seems to, would normally look something like this. Question 3 is often a matters and evidence question, or audit tests, procedures, whatever you want to call them, type of exercise. Question 4 is typically ethics, professional issues, practice management. And question 5, more often than not, is on audit reports. So that is our basic plan of attack, as you saw from what we're scheduling to do over the 4 classes. It's very much based around the types of questions that come up. Now I'm imagining that pretty much all of you are going to do the international stream paper. If anyone on here is doing a different stream, chances are it will make no difference whatsoever to what comes up. If there's anyone on here doing Singapore stream, for example, fine, no problem. The course is good to go for Singapore. If there is anyone on here doing UK, United Kingdom stream, can I please ask that you email me? And for everyone's benefit, here is a reminder of my email address. please email me so I can just explain to you the very small difference on the UK paper compared with international. It's not even a difference in the exam necessarily. There's something extra on the syllabus for UK stream, only something small, and it only comes up every 2 years or so, and it came up last time, so not a big issue at all. Okay, so I suppose where we should begin in our revision is we should take a look at the key exam technique issues. Yeah, I'm so sorry about this. I have got at least 3 illnesses going on at the moment, and they are just refusing to disappear. I'm afraid I'm going to be sniffing, coughing, spluttering, and generally falling to bits throughout revision. Okay, key exam technique. Now, of course, for each question type, we will look at the key technique before we start revising the questions and then use it whilst doing the questions. But before we look at specific areas of technique, let's begin with some general points which you need to remember throughout this exam. One of the many reasons why the pass rate on this exam is typically not very good is a lot of students can spot the issues, but the explanations are often not bad, they're just not there. There are no explanations. Way too many students write in their answers, "This increases risk." I would check this. This results in the following audit report. And in all 3 cases that I just said, one very important word was missing: because. You have got to explain why it's a risk, why it's an ethical threat, why you would do that test, why it is that audit report. You have got to justify what you are saying. So including the word because or something similar to the word because in every single point you make is going to be very helpful. Get into that habit. If you do that, you should end up writing at least 2 lines of text per mark you are trying to earn. Markers frequently complain about a lack of detail. Aim for at least a couple of lines, and the way to get 2 lines is say what you want to say and then say because. Now, I can't offer you too many magic formulas here. If you don't know why it's a risk or why you're doing that test or why that's the audit report outcome, or you do know but you can't explain yourself very clearly, then this advice has some value, but it's limited. The key with this, of course, is to revise and thus aid your understanding, but also you've got to practice writing out your answers. Up until now, it's not a big problem. If you've never written a real answer, it's not a problem. But we are now towards the end of October. Your exam is only about what's the date today? Tuesday. Just under 5 weeks away. Now is the time to start putting your thoughts in writing. The more of that you can do, the better. Of course, with some questions, just plan the answer plan. Make sure you can come up with the ideas. But on at least a few of the ones you're practicing, and more as you get towards the end of November, you've got to allocate yourself the full time, turn your mobile phone off, shut the curtains, Pretend you're not in at home, don't answer the door, don't answer anything, and write the answer out. Okay, next point. As we have seen when we have practiced questions in tuition, and as I said at the beginning of tuition, dates in questions are often very, very important. In particular, note the client's year end and start looking at when things are happening during the accounting year. Now, one little tip for you on that. Just consider this thought. Okay, there's your client's year end. Which means that the final audit work will be happening around about there. Let's imagine that year end, just to put some actual dates on this, is September the 30th, 2014. Thing is, you're sitting your exam in December 2014. So if you are in the middle of the final audit of this client, or maybe even towards the end of the audit of this client on December the 1st, 2014, bear this thought in mind. Let's imagine that in the story it says that on October the 29th, 2013, some event took place. Now, obviously that is in the current accounting year. Because the previous year end, September 30th, 2013, would be there. Thing is, if you are doing the 2014 year-end audit on December the 1st, 2014, I am tempted to suggest to you that on December the 1st, 2013, there is a pretty good chance you were still doing last year's audit. And if that is the case, and you were doing last year's audit when this event in the exam question took place, what does that make that event? It makes that event an IAS 10 event after the reporting period for the previous accounting year. What does that tell you? Well, of course, IAS 10 events are adjusting or non-adjusting, but if they're non-adjusting and really significant, they should have been disclosed at the previous year end. So if you look at that event, there is a chance that it's not an event for the financial statements this year that you're auditing. Maybe it's adjusting or disclosable in the prior year, telling you that this is not something affecting this year's accounts, but is in fact a prior period adjustment. So watch out with the dates in the question. If something happens early in the accounting year, then there's a pretty good chance that last year's accounts and audit process had not finished, meaning IAS 10 is still relevant last year, meaning maybe this should have been changed last year. Maybe. I mean, simple example. What if it says on October the 29th, the board decided to close down a division? Well, if they're closing something down, that says to me there's a good chance it's impaired. And if it's impaired on October the 29th, it was probably impaired 29 days earlier on September the 30th. Which means the assets of that division should probably have been impaired at the end of last year. The question is, were they? Because maybe the client didn't realise, maybe last year's audit team did not realise, meaning last year's accounts would then be wrong. So, watch out on the dates very carefully. Now, apart from those points, there's probably only one other thing I can say that affects questions across the board before we then get in and look at something specific. So my fourth even piece of advice and final piece of general advice is requirements and marks. And what I'm going to do to explain what I mean with this point is I'm going to give you now some specific advice about a particular question type that we're going to be looking at first. At the start of your exam, you of course have 15 minutes of reading time. What are you going to do with those 15 minutes? Well, if you read the ACCA's advice, they will tend to say, read the big case studies in question 1 and 2. Start to get a feel for what's going on. To which I would say, don't. Don't. There is no point reading any detail until you understand the context of what you're trying to do. In a similar way, we will not be starting any past exam questions until we understand what we're trying to do. So in the first 15 minutes reading time, what do I suggest you should do? Well, what you should do is what we will do when we do every question that we practice. And that is, number 1, you look at the marks for each part of the question. Generally speaking, 5 marks means say 5 things. The only real exception to that is when your examiner says identify and explain, and she frequently does that with risk questions. If she says identify and explain, she's typically going to give half a mark for identifying and up to another mark for the explanation. So a risk question that is worth, say, 18 marks is not looking for 18 risks. It's probably looking for 12. But with that one exception, typically if it says 5 marks, you are meant to make 5 separate points. Once you know how many points, the next thing to do is to look at the requirements. Do not go read the scenario. Now, if you're well practiced, you may well look at the requirements and after 5 seconds think, yeah, I know what I need to do here, and you can go and read. Well, that's fine. But most students I've met are not well practiced enough. So let's have a look at a little example of this and see what we should do. So let's imagine a question: can you get 1.5 marks for explanation? Yeah, well, yeah, you can, because you can't explain an issue without identifying it, can you? So the identification of it could be within the explanation. I doubt you'd get a total of 2 marks for talking about one issue. The point the examiner is making is if someone, let's say in a risk question, a risk of material misstatement, someone spots in the story that, I don't know, there's a discontinued operation. If you even mention discontinued operations in your answer, you'll probably get 0.5 mark. If you then say that with discontinued operations the risk is under or over disclosure, because IFRS 5 says you must disclose separately the results of a discontinued operation, which means the client may disclose something when they shouldn't, or not disclose it when they should, then you'll get the extra mark. If your explanation is not as full as what I just said, maybe you'll get 0.5 mark. So 0.5 mark for seeing there is an issue, 0.5 mark for attempting an explanation, and an additional 0.5 mark if your explanation is relatively clear. Okay? Now, of course, there are no rules on this, and if the examiner says for 10 marks, explain 5 things, well, 10 divided by 5 is 2. So if she does that, she's telling you how many marks. Okay, let's have a little example of requirements then. Let's imagine the question says, describe the ethical and professional issues in the above scenario. And it says 6 marks. In the first 15 minutes of the exam, you are not allowed to write in your answer booklet, but you are allowed to write on the question paper. So what I would be doing in the first 15 minutes is I would do this. I'd say, right, okay, ethical and professional issues. Okay, I remember ethical and professional issues. They have a technique, because when you see the word ethical, you will hopefully be thinking of 4 lines of attack to look for issues. You will be thinking SAFIM. You will be thinking C of I. You'll be thinking I of C. And you'll be thinking confidentiality. When you see professional issues, you will be thinking, yes, professional issues, know all about those. Professional issues, there are 4 main things that seem to come up in the answers. Those being, are there any money laundering clues? Is there anything here about the auditor's liability? Is there anything to do with practice management? Is there anything going to impact on my audit work? And that is what I would be noting, together with the number of marks, telling me I need to say 6 things. It might be about 3 ethical and 3 professional. It might not be. But that is about as much planning as I can do from that requirement. So that is what I will scribble down on the question paper, so that when I come back and actually do this question, and remember, ethics questions are often question 4, which means I might be doing this quite late in the exam, when my head is now full of all the stuff I've seen in question 1 and question 2, and maybe another question as well. When I get to this question, I can simply stare at those lists and go, yes, that's what I need to do for this exam. That is how I can earn 6 marks in this question. And then I'll go read the story looking for those sorts of points. There might be other points in there as well, but audit exam questions have been very repetitive over the years, and that's what the answer plan generally looks like. And I would do that for every requirement of every question on the paper. Now, as you just saw, that did not take me long. That requirement, 20-30 seconds to get those thoughts down. Partly because I'm well practiced and I know what the thoughts are I'm meant to have. But I'm also thinking, if that is 6 marks, bear in mind there's 120 marks worth of questions on the paper, 3 20-mark questions in the optional section, of which you do 2, so 120 marks in total. 6 marks is only 5% of the paper, which means you've got 20 times as much work to do as what I've just done to get through all of the requirements, and with only 15 minutes, well, you've probably got about 45 seconds to do what I just did there, maximum. So for each requirement, don't read the stories. Go through and plan your attack. And once you've done that, you'll have 3 optional questions with your technique planned for all 3 of them, and that should tell you which of those 3 questions you don't like the look of. Okay, now that tells you how to start off the exam paper, first 15 minutes. The other piece of advice I need to give you, I will give at the end of revision. Because the last piece of advice I'll be giving you on this course is what to do in the last 15 minutes before you walk into the exam hall. Because there is something crucial that you need to do. You do this, and it means the first 15 minutes will go beautifully. Just a word on the last bit of this course. We have 4 revision sessions, but then after all of that we have one final thing that happens. A 1-hour question and answer final mentoring session. Because your exam is on Monday the 1st, this final mentoring will happen on November the 28th, Friday night, before the weekend. I will be purely going through exam technique and making sure you're absolutely prepared for how you're going to attack the paper. But if you are panicking at that point, it's a good opportunity to come back and ask. If you've done the revision mock, by that point you should have had it back, which means if you've got specific queries, maybe worth raising them then. But we seem to have now opened up the concept of ethical and professional issues questions. So I've shown you what I would write on the exam paper. Let me now just explain in a bit more detail what all of that stuff means. Because some of us will be looking at that going, yeah, I know SAFEM, C of I of C, and some of you will be going, no, don't remember that. Okay, here we go. Ethics issues. One big area of ethics issues are threats to the auditor's objectivity. There are 6 types of threat. S, S, A, F, I, M. I remember them as SAFEM. You might have reorganized that list into something more memorable for you. Whatever works for you. Now, I shouldn't have to write these up on revision, but we've started the P7 revision fairly early. We like to spread the papers to try and avoid clashes for you, and given P7 is on day 1 of the exam timetable, I suppose, P7 starts early. So some of you, it will be a while since you did this, but hopefully you remember that we're talking about self-interest, self-review, advocacy, familiarity, intimidation, and the management threat. Now, I have already said, explain everything. So how do you explain these? Well, the whole point about threats to objectivity is that if you are not objective, or you are not perceived by shareholders to be objective, then either your opinion might be wrong, or shareholders might not trust your opinion. So if you are talking about threats to objectivity, you want to be saying something like this. Let's take a simple example. Your client is giving you presents. I know, self-interest threat, congratulations. 95% of the students on planet Earth are going to say self-interest. The pass rate on P7 is not 95%. It's typically less than 35%. So saying, oh, this is a self-interest threat is very, very clever, but is not going to get you enough to pass. You need to say a self-interest threat, meaning, and then you come down and you focus down here on this stuff. Which means you can either say, if auditors are getting gifts, they might deliberately give a favourable opinion, even though the accounts are wrong, to keep the client happy so they get more gifts in the future. Or if you prefer, if shareholders are aware that gifts are being given, they may not trust the auditors to give a fair opinion. And that's the bit that students typically miss out. They can spot the issue, they can even give it a name, self-interest. What they can't do, I think because they either don't understand the importance of objectivity, or they just don't realise they're meant to be explaining things and therefore write way too little. So there we go, that's a reminder of threats to objectivity. Oh, no, 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 no. C of I is conflicts of interest, where audit firms find themselves acting for two companies who are maybe in competition, and it causes all sorts of problems, confidentiality of information between the two clients, and how can you advise one client properly if advising them well means you damage another client? I mean, the simple example I'd give here is, imagine you are a boxing trainer and you've got two boxers who are now going to fight each other for the World Championship. Well, if you train both of these guys, you know how this guy can beat that one because you know his weaknesses, and you know it vice versa. But any advice you give one guy is going to harm the other one. So you can't look after both fighters, can you? Because you'd be damaging one by helping the other. And it's the same with auditors. Now, I suppose if that did happen, if you had two prize fighters who were going to fight each other, surely you'd assign them two different trainers, probably put them in two different boxing rings, in two different buildings, and keep them apart. And of course, you'd make sure both boxers were aware that this was happening, and you'd make sure both trainers kept well apart from each other and didn't talk to each other. Common sense. The I of C is, don't forget, another ethical issue is the integrity of your client. You do not want to be working for people you don't trust. Many reasons. Their bad reputation may rub off on you, but if you're trying to check something and you don't trust you're being given the information properly, well, common sense, isn't it? And confidentiality, I shouldn't really need to explain, so I'm not going to say a word about that. And who knows, maybe it will come up in a practice question that we will be doing this evening. Who knows? So those are your ethical issues. In terms of your professional issues, money laundering, as I tipped, by the way, came up in June 14, came up on the last exam paper, which would rather suggest it is less likely to come up on this one. My exam tips, by the way, are uploaded on the platform already. Those I did a few days ago, they are uploaded. Liability of the auditor. Anything you read in a question that makes you think, ooh, if we do that or say that, there's a risk we might get sued. Make a note of it in your answer. Practice management is a topic all in its own right. I'll come back to that one in a minute. Impact on audit. If there's a little story that says ethical professional issues, and in the story you're looking at something which has accounting implications or would affect who you might send on an audit or when you might do the audit, so staffing, timing, accounting issues, well, those are issues for you to consider. They will affect the work that you do. Practice management. Let's have a little look at that, and then the first question of the course. We'll get a look. Okay, practice management. The things you need to know about are fees. And for fees, there are really only a couple of things you're meant to be aware of, which are lowballing, oops, and contingent fees. I'm not going to tell you which, but one of those is banned by the ACCA and the other one is allowed, but there are issues with it. I will say no more. That's the sort of factual knowledge revision that if you've not done yet, you need to do yourself. I should not have to just repeat knowledge at you on revision. That is something you do so that I can spend the time here focusing on technique and questions. Another topic in practice management is called tendering. Trying to win a client and therefore thinking about what to put in your proposal. As you might remember from when we did this on the tuition phase, think of tendering for a new client like you trying to get a job. So think of it as your CV. But this is your firm's CV instead of your personal CV. Third topic, quality control. Quality control is at two levels. Quality and control for your firm as a whole. So for example, you'd expect audit firms to have lots of training, lots of documented processes, and then on each piece of work. And on each piece of work, you would expect to be looking at things like direction and supervision of staff, review of work done, selecting suitable staff to do the job, and things like that. And one more area of practice management that comes up from time to time, and which is getting a little bit overdue, by the way, is advertising. And the moment you see advertising in a question, you should be thinking things like no unsubstantiated claims. No adverse comments re competitors. Nothing that sounds unethical or illegal. Make sure you're clear and detailed in the information that you are advertising. No misuse of the ACCA name and things like that. Okay then, well that is the first stage of our revision covered. You'll notice I cover the technical stuff, the knowledge, as quickly as we can so that we can take the technique that we saw earlier and get into exam questions. Now the study planner, which obviously you've not seen yet because it's not been uploaded, it will be uploaded before class number 2, tells you which questions we are going to do. I will tell you each question as I put it up on the screen where it comes from, but of course the question will be up on the screen as I am doing it, so there's no need for you to have the question in front of you. Focus on watching what I am doing and importantly how I am doing it. Okay? Okay, here we go then. The first of the questions that we're going to look at, and on revision we only do questions from exam papers that your examiner has written, okay? So we keep it up to date. So we go back a little way, but not too far. December 2008, question number 4. So that's the first question we're going to take a look at. So, whoa. Here is December 2008, question number 4. And let's just see if we can just make this a little bit bigger for you. 200. Oh, that's a bit too much. 75. I think should do it. Yeah, I think that will be enough. But as I said earlier, don't read the stories. No, 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 no. The moment you start reading the stories, your head is full of story. There's no point filling your head with story until your head is organised so that when you fill it with story, the story goes into the places where you need it to go. So we go straight to the requirement. And I noticed that this question says, identify and explain. Ooh, now that might well mean, based on what I said earlier, that perhaps it will be half a mark for identifying and 1 for explaining, perhaps. Which means if my explanations are good quality, maybe I don't need 7, 7 and 6. Maybe I need about 5, 5, 4. Having said that, on exam day you're going to be under pressure. And yeah, it might be 1.5 marks, but it will only be 1.5 marks if your explanations are good. So my advice is, for safety, I'd be guided by this and aim for 7 issues, 7 issues, 6 issues. The question says, identify the ethical and practice management implications. So the moment I see the word ethical, I am thinking SAFEM, C of I of C, and confidentiality. And the moment I see practice management, so it doesn't say professional, it says practice management, I'm now thinking quality control, I'm thinking fees, I'm thinking maybe it's something to do with advertising, I'm thinking something to do with tendering. But there is one other issue with practice management as well, a sort of general issue. What is practice management? It is managing a practice, running a firm of accountants. And therefore, one other thing I am thinking is if I'm running a firm of accountants, I would like my firm to make some money. So I need to be on the lookout for good commercial ideas that would help my firm make money, but within the boundaries of ethics and other practice management restraints. So that is what I am thinking. I can see here there are 3 stories to deal with. That is as much planning as I can do from the requirements. So now, apart from remembering, explain everything, explain everything, explain everything. I now go and read the story and start planning my answer. Now, as we go through the course, some of the questions we practice, I will be taking you through an answer plan, and some of them I will write part of the answer in full so you can be reminded of the level of detail to which you should be aiming. But first, let's make sure we can come up with a plan. So, 7 marks. Is it A, B and C? It is. I like to write the number just to remind myself how many points I'm trying to make. It says ethical practice management implications in respect of a business arrangement with Murray. Now, I've seen enough exam questions to know what that actually means. It means, well, a business arrangement is going into business with whoever Murray are. Maybe they're one of our clients. Maybe they're not one of our clients. I don't know. I suppose the clue is the word arrangement. Where else do you see that word in your studies? IFRS 11, joint arrangements. Joint ventures, joint operations, joint arrangements. So it's some sort of joint venture-y type thing, presumably. So what we do is we go and read the story, and then we attack the story with SAFEM, conflicts of interest, integrity of client, confidentiality, quality control, fees, advertising, tendering, and B, commercial. Okay, let's go read it. You are a senior manager in Becker & Co. Tennis fans may have spotted the theme here. A firm of chartered certified accountants offering audit and assurance services mainly to large privately owned companies. The firm has suffered from increased competition, 2 new firms setting up in the same town, several audit firms gone to new firms, loss of revenue, and an overstaffed audit department. So you're losing clients, meaning you've got staff sitting around twiddling their thumbs. Well, that's no good. Bob McEnroe, one of the partners of Becker, has asked you to consider how the firm could react to this situation. Okay, so the first thing I noticed from the story is if we are reacting to this, what do we need to react to? We need to react to the fact that you've got staff sitting around, and therefore I suggest it might be a good idea to find work for them. Otherwise, they are a very expensive luxury. And also, there has been a loss of revenue. So you'd better find some opportunities to earn more money then. Right, here we go then. Suggestion number 1. Murray, a manufacturer of electronic equipment, is one of Becker's audit clients. Now, the moment you see the word audit client, that means you are issuing an opinion, and that means your opinion needs to be protected against the threat to your objectivity, meaning SAFEM is probably going to be relevant here. You are aware that the company has recently designed a new product. Ooh, now if this was a risk of material misstatement question, I'd be thinking IAS 38, development costs, and whether they should be capitalised. However, it is not a risk of material misstatement question. There is nothing in here about audit tests, and as such, that is not going to be relevant to this answer. Which market research indicates is likely to be very successful? Well, lucky them, we have an audit client who is about to have success with a new product. Just before we go any further, let's go check our lists. Our client has got a product which is going to be very successful. SAFEM, conflicts of interest, not aware of any yet. Integrity of client, no. Confidentiality, yes, because we'll need to make sure we don't let anyone tell other companies about our client's new product. But we're meant to be talking about the business arrangement. We haven't even got to the business arrangement yet. So if you start talking about confidentiality issues, I'm not sure they're going to be relevant to what the question is asking. We need to find the business arrangement. So let's keep reading. The development of the product has been a huge drain on cash resources. Again, if this was a question asking something different, I'd be thinking going concern. But that's not what the question is asking. The managing director of Murray has written to the audit engagement partner to see if Becker would be interested in making an investment in the new product. Right. Now I can see the business arrangement. It has been suggested Becker could provide finance for the completion of the development and the marketing of the product. So they're running out of money, but they've got a great new product, so they're looking for the auditors to put the money in. Well, I think I can start to see some issues here. The finance would be in the form of convertible debentures, which means debentures are a loan. Convertible means it can be converted into shares at some point. Alternatively, a joint venture company in which control is shared between Murray and Becker could be established to manufacture, market and distribute the new product. Okay, I think I know enough about the story. I need perhaps 7 separate issues here, and that's why I don't start writing. I stick with my plan and my little ideas lists to try and generate as many separate points as I can. We start with SAFEM. Is there a self-interest threat that could affect our audit? Yes. Why? We must explain. Okay, how would my audit opinion be at risk? It would be at risk because this is an audit client, and if I've gone into business with them and am making money from a lovely new product, do I want to risk that by giving them a bad audit report? No. And that's the answer. Ignore financial statement errors to protect investment. And as long as you write something similar to that, you are going to get some marks for that. Keep going through the lists. Self-interest, self-review. Is there a self-review threat? Well, surely, however you finance this, the profits from this company, or this product, sorry, the half that belongs to the client is going to be in their accounts because they're earning some of the return from this. They're splitting it with you. But isn't there a risk that when you audit their accounts, some of the numbers in the accounts are the returns from the new product which you are jointly managing if you do a joint venture? So I would say self-review, because if there is a joint venture approach to this, the profit for your client in their financial statements is going to be affected by your 50% management of the JV company. Think about it. You set up a joint venture 50-50. When that joint venture company creates figures, you're half responsible for those numbers because you half control the company. Your half is earned by you, the other half is transferred into your client's accounts, which you're going to audit. Self-review threat. Any other types of threat here? I'm thinking you might be able to argue advocacy, because you are on the client side. If you are helping to finance this new product and marketing it, you are speaking on behalf of the client. You are investing on behalf of the client, which means shareholders might look at you and say, you and the client are in cahoots together, therefore I don't trust your audit opinion anymore. Familiarity. Well, if you're jointly running a company, if you take the joint venture approach, of course you'll get familiar. You're jointly running a company with them. You see my point here. If you just write based on what you read in the story, then you'll pick up on some of these, no doubt. But if you force yourself to go through the list, you can pick up additional ideas as you go. Now I'm thinking I could probably get intimidation and management threats in here as well. Intimidation, a client might threaten to take away the business opportunity, especially if it's a joint venture, if I don't do what they say regarding their accounts. Management threat, you're going into management with them if you do the joint venture. So of course there's a management threat. But maybe this is not just ethics. So don't just leap into all of those points. Let's look at the other stuff. Conflict of interest? Well, unless you've got other clients in the same industry, and it hasn't mentioned any of that, I can't see how this is conflict of interest. Integrity of client. I can't see anything to suggest I shouldn't trust these guys. Confidentiality. I suppose we could say if we go into a business arrangement, we're going to know more about the new product. But then, if you're an auditor, you should know everything about the company. So I don't really see why you're going to have access to any extra information that you otherwise would have had on the audit. So I don't see confidentiality as relevant. Quality control. Everything we do as an auditor, we should be worried about quality. I can sort of see an issue here, but it's not about the quality of the audit. It's more about, is our firm experienced in making investments like these? Don't forget, you're a firm of accountants. You don't do investing in companies. It's not what you do. Have you assessed investments before? Have you made investments? Have you then reviewed those investments to make sure they're still worthwhile? This may well be out of your comfort zone as a firm. Dangerous tactic. What else does it say up here? Fees, lowballing contingent fees. Well, it's not about either of those, is it? Advertising, it's nothing to do with that. Tendering, it's nothing to do with that. Be commercial. What are we meant to be doing? Finding stuff for our staff to do in the audit department. Well, this is not going to help with that. Looking for more revenue. It will help with that. So, being commercial, this sounds like a good opportunity. If what the client is saying is correct, and this does look like a great new product and they just need some cash to help finish it, this might be a great idea. Now, as I said, I think there are additional threats to objectivity I could mention, but I'm beginning to get towards 7 points. I think this question, given that this is a proposal, wants us to conclude on whether we should do it or not. There are loads of threats to our objectivity, suggesting we should not be doing this sort of arrangement with an audit client. I mean, another point that's just come into my head is that if we get convertible debentures, I've mentioned the joint venture issue a couple of times in my answer, but if we get convertible debentures, that means we are lending the client money, and that is prohibited by the Code of Ethics. Creates too much of a self-interest threat that we explained earlier. And if we then convert it to shares, we become a shareholder, and that is prohibited as well for audit clients. So do you know what I'm thinking? Sensible conclusion? We cannot do this unless you resign as their auditor. And at that point, I don't know if I want to do that or not. Resigning as their auditor is going to depend on how good this commercial opportunity looks. If this is going to make you a lot of money, give them up as an audit client. Let someone else audit them. Because then all those issues which we've raised, all of which are threats to your objectivity, all of which therefore are only relevant because you're the auditor, all of those other issues go away. I'd resign as auditor and take the business opportunity. So there we go, my friends. That is how I would go about the first one. Now, before we go any further, let me just remind you what I did there. I looked at the requirements, I broke them down, I saw ethical, I saw practice management. I then started thinking, what does ethical mean? What sort of issues does practice management cover? And I looked at the marks. I then read the story, and I then mapped the story against the various ethical issues and the various practice management to see which ones turned into potential comments. And that got me a nice range of points. And because the question was a proposal of something our firm could do, I tried to give a conclusion and I linked it back to the firm's current position, which is we have staff sitting around with nothing to do. This won't help with that. And we're looking for opportunities to generate money, and I would suggest this might help with that. So there we go. That is the approach. Only read the stories once you have dealt with the requirements and understand what it is you're trying to do. Okay, we're making progress, so let's keep going. Let's have a look at a plan for point number 2. Also worth 7 marks. A recruitment service offered to clients. Sounds interesting. Let's go look. Becca is considering expanding the provision of non-audit services. Okay. Ingrid Sharapova more tennis players for us. A senior manager in Becker has suggested the firm could offer a recruitment advisory service to clients specialising in the recruitment of finance professionals. Help our clients hire members of their finance department. I know, you're spotting an issue. Please remember, we don't need an issue, we need 7 marks worth of issues, so just hold back. Becker would charge a fee for this service based on the salary of the employee recruited. Ooh, it's talking fees. And if your fee depends on something, then that fee is a contingent fee. And contingent fees cause issues. So that better come up in the answer. Ingrid Sharapova worked as a recruitment consultant for a year before deciding to train as an accountant. Okay. Well, there's the magic list. Should we be giving recruitment advice? Well, various ways we can attack this. Let's go with our magic lists. But I think most of you will be hitting SAFEM before we hit anything else. So let's do SAFEM last and see what other issues there are. Let's start with practice management. Quality control. Are we concerned about quality control over this advice if we give it? Yes, because as with the first story, we are not a recruitment firm, we're an accounting firm. There is therefore a danger that the quality of staff we have to offer this service may not be good enough. We have Ingrid Sharapova, but bear in mind she did 1 year in recruitment and then gave up to do something else, which tells me she probably wasn't that good at it. There is no evidence we have any other staff capable of doing this. So, taking a different approach to it in terms of quality control, one thing I'd want to say is our firm only seems to have one person, and she has very little experience. There is therefore a danger of poor quality advice. Now, I might turn that around and say, as a firm of accountants, maybe we should be in a position to know what a good finance professional looks like. But quality would be one of my concerns. If we are going to do this, we would almost certainly have to hire more staff. And at that point, I'd be starting to think commercially and ask ourselves, is the benefit going to outweigh the cost? So that has forced my brain into thinking commercial. Whoops. And would the revenues be greater than these costs? Well, I suppose, would this sell? Would my clients, as a firm of accountants, would my clients pay me for advice on this? Let's think about it. Would you go to PricewaterhouseCoopers and say, hello PwC, we need to hire some accountants, could you help us? I'm thinking you probably would. You'd trust PwC, Deloitte, etc. to help with this. So maybe our clients would want this service. Maybe what you should do is a bit of market research. Ask your clients. Don't want to start hiring people and spending money before you do the market research. So I've thought commercially, I thought quality control. Back up, here we go. Fees. There is an issue here with fees. Now there's nothing else I can see on practice management. This isn't advertising, it isn't tendering, but fees. Because this is a contingent fee. Why is that a problem? Because when a fee is linked to the outcome of the work that you do, there is a danger that the outcome of the work you do is influenced by the fee. How would that work here? We get a fee based on the salary of the person we recommend. Result, there is a risk that we just recommend the highest salary individual to maximize our fee, even if they are not the best quality. That's got to be a risk, isn't it? And that's a danger, because that is going to affect quality control, potentially liability as well. So I think that's got to go into my answer. Now, those are the most obvious things I can see from practice management. How many have we got? Well, I've got about 3 or 4 separate bullet points there. That tells me it's not enough, so now I think ethics. If I'm helping my clients hire finance staff, SAFIM, self-interest. Well, the contingent fee is the real self-interest issue here. So I'm not sure about that. Self-review. If we're helping audit clients find new finance staff, when we go and audit the accounts, we're auditing the accounts that have been produced by the people we recommended. That's self-review. We might not want to highlight mistakes made by people we recommended. Brilliant. Self-review. Because we would end up auditing the work done by staff we recommended. And of course got paid a fee for recommending. So there would be a genuine risk here that we would not wish to highlight their mistakes. Good. Getting towards a decent answer, but still need a little bit more given the marks available. SSA, advocacy, is working on behalf of your client. Not really. Familiarity. I suppose there is a risk that if we recommend people, we might recommend people we are already aware of, like people who used to work for our audit firm maybe, or people we've met at other companies who we think we know pretty well. You could argue a familiarity threat. If the people hired that we recommended are well known to the audit staff. And if that is the case, when they go and audit that company, there is a risk that they reduce their professional skepticism and say, oh, they'll get it right, we know these guys, they're really good. SAFIM, intimidation, doesn't strike me as an obvious point. Management threat, yes. There is a management threat as well, because directors should make hiring decisions, which means if we select the final candidate, we will be seen, sorry, that's not the greatest explanation, we are going to be at risk of being seen, so the auditors, seen as part of the board. We're seen as doing things the directors do and therefore not separated. enough. So if we are going to do this for clients, we would have to make it clear to them that they make the final decision and all we could give is advice only. Now I think I've got about 7 points now, which is great. So again, I'll try and make a conclusion. What's the firm trying to do? Seek more revenue, use the staff they've got who are currently sitting around doing not very much. How does this proposal work? Well, in terms of getting extra revenue, I don't know. We would need to do market research to see if clients want the service, and we ought to also consider the costs of hiring some recruitment staff. Would it use our idle staff? No. Except, I suppose, potentially Ingrid, who sounds like she might be involved. Any other audit staff won't be able to do recruitment. It's a totally different skill. So second story done. Again, same approach as the first one. Go through the lists for ideas to generate some content. Focus on must explain, not just list. And think about the fact that these are proposals, and proposals are there to try and achieve something. There are two things your firm wants to achieve in this question: more revenue and use the underutilised staff. So far we've seen two things that would seem to have a chance of generating revenue but don't really solve your staff issue. We've got one story left. I'm guessing, therefore, it will help to solve the staff issue. Otherwise, why has the examiner told us we've got underutilised staff? But before we do number three, we need a break. It is 7:32. I've been going for ages. So we're going to have a little break at that point. We will break for 13 minutes. And we will start again at 19:45 UK time. So give yourself a little break, go and get yourself some water, some coffee, whatever it is that keeps you going, get some fresh air maybe, and I'll see you in about 12 minutes time. So not a long break, just enough to refresh ourselves a bit. See you in 12 minutes. Okay, folks. Well, I'm still standing, just about. Let's see how we get on for our final hour. So we've started looking at some questions now. Let's just get rid of something up on the screen, getting in our way. We are looking at this question up here, which is December 2008, question number 4. We have dealt with the first 2 issues. We're now going to deal with the third one. We've had a little break. So, given that we've had a little break, quick thinking, get back into what the question's asking. It's easy to miss it. Easy to forget after a few minutes doing something else. So the question is asking for the ethical and practice management issues. Because of that, these are the sort of things we're thinking, because those are the things you should always think when you see the word ethics and you see the words practice management. We now do C. C is worth 6 marks and says temporary staff assignments. Ethical, practice management, okay? Okay, C then. Several audit clients are experiencing staff shortages. Well, that's helpful, isn't it? Because we've got too many staff at the moment. It has been suggested that temporary staff assignments could be offered. A number of audit managers, seniors, could be seconded to clients for periods not exceeding 6 months, after which they would return to Becker. Again, there's every chance that you're reading that and going, this is obvious. Well, 1 point might be obvious, maybe even 2, but it says 6. So we need to look for 6 marks worth of content. So part C, looking for 6 marks of plan, secondments, ethical issues, SAFEM, self-interest. Is there something we might do that is in our best interests and not our clients? Yes, we might second them staff who are not actually good enough because we want them out of our office, because when you've got a lack of work, the first people to be sitting around twiddling their fingers are the people who maybe aren't so good. So I'm thinking potential issue, self-interest threat. We might send our worst staff to clients. To give these staff work to do. Now obviously that is not good, because that means our staff will be suffering, sorry, not our staff, our clients will be suffering because we are doing what's best for us, not what's best for them. So there is that risk. The one, of course, that you are all surely thinking of at this point, especially Farry, is self-review. Because you're thinking, hang on a minute, if they go for no more than 6 months, then the next time we audit that company, they're probably back in our office. There's a risk we send them. So if staff are sent back on an audit to client they were seconded to, they are at risk of checking their own work. And the risk is, if you check your own work, you are less likely to detect mistakes or admit to them. Now, having said that, we do know a fairly easy way around it, don't we? So as long as we kept track of who has been seconded to what client, we could simply send different members of the audit staff back, and that would create enough of a gap that the audit shouldn't be affected too much. Advocacy. Nah. Familiarity? Yes. Because if there's familiarity, if we are sending our staff to clients, we might be auditing them while our staff member is still there, meaning we are auditing people we know. And if someone who has been seconded is now back in the audit firm and we send them back to that client, they are auditing people they know because they worked there for a while. So absolutely, familiarity threat, because we are auditing clients where we know some of the finance staff. And whenever we talk about familiarity, we should talk about the negative effect on our ability to challenge what's in their accounts, our ability to be skeptical. SSAFIM, intimidation, probably not. Management, possibly. If our staff on secondment are making management decisions for the client. Okay, keep going. Conflict of interest. Can't see it. Integrity of client in question. They're not asking for this, we're looking to do it. Confidentiality, no, because auditors are already entitled to see everything at the client. So I know your staff will see stuff because they're there, but I can't see that being an issue either. Practice management, quality control. Yeah, actually, I think we ought to be careful. We'd have to make sure the client is responsible for checking our staff's work whilst they are seconded. So we'd have to say, look, once this person is working with you guys, we can't monitor them anymore, so you'd have to. Fees. Well, there's nothing mentioned here for fees. Do we want to mention it in the answer? I'm not sure we do. I mean, I suppose we could say we'd want to make sure that the client is paying not just for the salary of these staff, but also an extra element on top, so we're making a profit. But it doesn't feel like a major issue, it just feels like common sense. Could go in the answer, don't know. Advertising, it's not that. Tendering, it's not that. Commercial. Well, if we have got clients who have staff shortages, but we have too many staff, this would sound like a very sensible proposal. We give our staff something to do. They'd also get additional experience working at another company, which would be no bad thing for their future development. We get some of their salary back, maybe all of their salary back while they're working there. The only slight problem I can see here is, what if our staff don't want to return? What if they like it so much, being seconded there, they say, actually, I don't want to come back, I want to stay here. So we'd have to be a bit careful here and make it clear that staff have got to come back. Clients can't try and keep hold of them. It is definitely a temporary arrangement. Yes, that's exactly what I've just said, Farah. Yeah, I agree. Now, always when you are planning answers, don't forget the marks. It's worth 6 marks. Have we said at least 6 things? I think we are about right. There we go. First question. Done. Now notice when we did that question, or when I did that question, I had a strict technique that I stuck to. Because if you don't stick to the technique, you will read those 3 stories and you will think, ooh, a business arrangement, self-interest threat. Yes, I know, that's the obvious one, but there are 7 marks available. You will see the temporary staff assignments we've just seen, and everyone spots self-review. The question is, will you spot anything else? And the middle one, which I've forgotten already. What was the middle one? Oh yeah, recruitment services. Well, who knows what you'll spot with that one. The contingent fee, I guess, is probably the most obvious point that leaps out, but it's worth 7 marks. It's not worth 1 mark. So don't let the story lead your answer. Let your technique lead your answer, and you will get a lot more ideas to talk about. Remember to explain them, and bingo, you will pass P7. Right, first question down, straight into a second question. We want to get through as many as we can. And the second question we're going to look at is going to be, what is it going to be? It's going to be that one, I think. Or is it that one? I can't remember. It's that one. So this is June 09, again, question number 4, notice. The ethics question is frequently question 4. And this one is a little bit different in that part A of the question is technical. And then part B of the question is going to be assessing the issues, etc. So let's start with part A, and as always, let's go to the requirement first. Although there's not much of a story there to read, but let's read the requirement. Explain what is meant by the term professional competence and due care, and outline how firms of chartered certified accountants can ensure that the principle is complied with. Well, there are 4 marks. I will try to say 4 things. What is meant by the term professional competence? I then noticed the magic word and, suggesting there's 2 separate things. I then noticed the magic word and again, which means there are 3 separate things I need to do. What do we mean by competence? What do we mean by due care? And what do firms do about it? Now, I'm not sure necessarily I need to break the answer down into 3 or 4 separate parts, but it just helps me to have different angles as to how to attack the question. So let's see if we can put together a little plan for part A. Don't get many technical questions on P7, but you will get a few marks, so your knowledge is important. Well, competence is your ability to do something. What does that mean in the context of the Code of Ethics? It means only accept work you are competent to do. And once you've accepted work, assign staff with the necessary skills and experience. Now, in our business of teaching students, we have a similar issue. I don't want to be teaching something I'm not competent to teach, but equally, the stuff I am competent to teach, I've got to keep on top of. So another thing that firms should do is ensure staff do something called continuing professional development. In other words, staff are keeping up to date both with technical changes, but also changes in working practices, skills of being in an office, team management, blah, 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 blah. Remember, it's only worth 4 marks, and I feel like I have both defined competence and said what firms do about it. So I should now move on and look at due care. What is due care? Well, it's doing things carefully, but that's just repeating the question. What do we mean by carefully? If you're doing something carefully, you are allocating enough time and resources, for example staff, to do the work to a professional standard. What else do firms do to make sure they've carried out their work in such a way? Review the work of all staff. So someone more senior will check your work. That helps care. I suppose plan the work. Document your work. Are all indications of how firms try to carry out work carefully. Firm should have processes. That is another way that firms carry out their work carefully. I have never tried to memorize that. All I've done is broken the question down, switched on my common sense button in my brain and worked it out, because the word competence and the word care are both words in the English language. They don't just apply to auditing, do they? So really there's no excuses with a question like that, and from my experience the worst answers are the ones written by students who are going into their memory and trying to memorize what they've learned as a definition instead of just relaxing a bit and using common sense. Okay, let's now move on and take a look at part B. It says, assess the ethical. Oh, look, it's ethical again. So I'm thinking SAFEM, I am thinking conflicts of interest, integrity of client, and I'm thinking confidentiality. And professional issues raised, I'm thinking money laundering, I'm thinking liability, I'm thinking practice management, which of course will be fees, advertising, tendering, quality control, etc. And also I'm thinking, but running out of space, the impact on my audit was another professional issue on my little list of things to remember to try and answer this question. So those are the sort of things I need to use, and I might need those quite a bit for the first one, where there are 8 marks available. Second one is only 5. So those are my thoughts, explain everything I write. Let's go read the first story about contaminated plastic used by Headford. You are a senior manager in Clifton. Let's just make this a little bit bigger, shall we? Let's go for 178%. Bit of inflation. Okay. You are a senior manager in Clifton, responsible for the audit of Headford, manufacturer of toys exported all over the world. Okay. Now we're meant to be talking about contaminated plastic. I've not seen that yet, so let's find it. The following matter brought to your attention by Audit Senior, who has just completed the planning of the forthcoming audit for the year ending 30th of June 09. It is a date. And dates tend to be important. Now this question, as I said, was from the June 09 exam. Therefore, if the year end is the 30th of June, and this was sat in the June exam sitting, the year end is about 4 weeks away. Okay, so we're planning the audit, but the year end has not finished yet. In this question, recommend any actions, but last question didn't ask. Can we still add in last question, I mean actions? In the last question it said, here are 3 proposals, can you do them? So if you're going to do them, but you've highlighted issues like ethical problems, you'll have to suggest the actions that allow you to get around the issues so you can do them. So I think in the last one you have to suggest actions because it fits the nature of the question. So yes, I would say you could. Right, so it's not the year end yet. Don't know how relevant that is. Let's have a look. During a discussion with the production manager, it was revealed, no problem. It was revealed that there have been some quality control problems with the toys, so this is not your audit firm's quality control, it's the client, manufactured between March and May. Oh look, there are some more dates. March and May, so that's just before the year end then. So this is a problem that has only just happened. It has affected what they are manufacturing, which is their inventory. If there is a problem with their inventory over recent weeks, does that mean that the inventory at the year end could be impacted? Could be, couldn't it? Keep that thought in mind. Some of the plastic used in the manufacture of the products have been contaminated with a dangerous chemical, which has the potential to explode, wow, if it's exposed to high temperatures. Right, what do we know so far? Dangerous products. Let's just start with that. So, B part 1, we're looking for 8. So, ethical threats, not seeing any of those yet. Conflict of interest, nah. Integrity of client, nothing yet. Confidentiality, nothing yet. Professional issues, money laundering, exploding toys, no. Liability of the auditor, no. Practice management, advertising, fees, quality control, tendering, help, this is not going well. Impact on the audit. Well, auditors have got to audit the accounts. Inventory is in the accounts. But before we note that, when I say impact on the audit, think through the whole process. Will it impact the planning of my audit? Well, yes, I will want to spend more time on the audit of inventory because the inventory is dangerous. So, there's a danger of valuation issues here because if there's any plastic or toys in the year-end inventory, and remember the year-end has not happened yet, then the net realisable value is probably less than cost. In fact, the net realisable value is probably 0. If you've got exploding plastic, you can't use it, can you? Now, I haven't read the whole story yet, and maybe it will say they've got rid of it all, in which case, maybe not an issue. But I'm just thinking through the impact on the audit. And when I audit inventory, I audit it in 2 steps. There's the stuff I do on the final audit, but I also attend the stock take. And I'm thinking that year-end stock take has not happened yet. It will happen in 4 weeks. And I'm not sure I want to send my staff to go and count things that go bang. So I'm now worried about my staff safety. And I'm going to ask the client to reassure me that if any of our audit staff are on the premises, they're not in danger. So I'd like to look at stuff like, are they going to segregate any of the items left that are potentially dangerous? Are they storing them in a nice cold environment? Because what we read was, heat, make bang. Cold, sound good. And you're now looking at this going, staff safety from exploding toys is going into the answer, to which I say, does it impact an audit if your staff are at danger? Yes, so it's going in then. I'm also thinking this won't be just about inventory, because if there are exploding toys, that sounds to me like potential legal claims, which means I'll also need to spend more time on IAS 37 provisions and contingent liabilities. because I'm guessing there is potential for that. In fact, I'm also now thinking contingent assets if they can claim against their supplier who sold them the plastic which is causing all of the problems. Oh. But I've not read all the story yet, so let's go back and read the story. Headford did not recall any of the products which had been manufactured during that time from customers, as management felt that the risk of injury was remote. Well, that's the end of the story. We don't have enough points yet. Is there anything else? Let's go again. Ethics. Let's do Safim last, just to be different. Ethics. Conflict of interest with other clients. There's only one client mentioned. No. Integrity of client. Bingo. Integrity of client. No warning to their customers. Now, surely that's an integrity issue, and if these guys aren't nice to their customers, how nice and honest are they going to be to the auditors? I'm not sure we want these guys as a client, to be honest. And the moment we do that, I'm thinking, should we resign? Confidentiality. Well, that's going to be an issue, isn't it? Because we should remember that with confidentiality, in general, anything happening at a client remains secret, unless you think the law would force you to disclose it or you think it's in the public interest. Is anyone aware of a law that says if you're auditing a company that has exploding toys, you should tell someone? Well, I'm no legal expert, but I don't think there's any laws. Is it in the public interest to be warned that children might explode? Yes. So there is surely a public interest argument to disclose if client refuses to. Now, this is dangerous, and whenever you're thinking of breaching confidentiality, I would be getting legal advice, see what our lawyers think about this, but there must be a need to disclose here, I think. Safim. Self-interest, self-review, advocacy, management, intimidation, familiarity. I can't see any issues here affecting our ability to audit this company properly, so I don't think it's any of those. I don't think this is Safim at all. I think it's integrity of client and confidentiality, plus the impact of the audit in terms of inventory, valuation, provisions, contingent liabilities, staffing issues, in particular staff safety, and just having one more quick think through professional issues, liability. And if it's ever discovered that we knew about these exploding toys and we didn't tell anyone, I think we'd be in trouble. Whew. Now that was a bit tough because typically with ethics questions the focus is very heavily on Safim and some nice easy threats to objectivity that leap out at us. I don't think this is about threats to objectivity at all. I think it's about all the other issues in here. So that one's tough. I'm not even sure I've got the full 8 marks worth there, but I've clearly got enough to pass, at least 5 or 6 marks worth, and as such, having gone through my lists at least twice, I have to force myself to move on and accept that I might not get as many points as I need to get full marks, but as long as I've got enough to pass, all is good. Let's move on to number 2 and look at Kong. Same approach. Your firm has been invited to tender for the provision of the external audit service to Kong. Well, that immediately gives me some ethical professional issues. I don't know if they'll be relevant to the story much, but a new client, what sort of things should I be thinking about? Well, in terms of the tender, I'd want to include the qualities, locations, services, etc. of our firm. Potential new client, I should think therefore about threats to objectivity, competence, conflicts of interest with other clients, integrity of client, fees, staff, resources, professional clearance. Are the preconditions for an audit in place? And as I keep heading down that list, I say stop. Stop, stop, stop. There are stacks of issues for potential new clients. There are loads of them. It's only worth 5 marks, and I've not read the rest of the story. It can't be about writing all of that stuff, because there's too much. Some of this will prove to be relevant, some of it won't. So, let's go back to the story and try and work out what. Okay, so we've been invited to tender for Kong, but it's all sounding too general at the moment. You are aware that Kong operates in the same industry as Headford. Thank you. Conflict of interest it is. And the two companies often enter into highly publicised, aggressive advertising campaigns featuring similar products. Right, before we read any further, now I can go back to my general list and I can say what? Am I competent? Yes, we know the industry. There is a positive because you audit a competitor. But clearly you're going to have to talk about conflicts of interest and the risk of confidentiality breaches and the fact it's going to be hard to look after two competitors, especially as in the story it says they're constantly fighting. Now I think I said this when we went through the tuition phase, but come on, do you really think one audit firm audits Apple and Samsung, despite the fact they spend most of their lives in court shouting at each other? Of course they don't. So realistically, the whole idea of saying two teams from two separate offices, I mean, you can put it in the answer if you like, but realistically, you can't audit two competitors if they're already fighting all the time. I'm also going to question the integrity of Kong. I mean, why ask us when they know we audit one of their competitors? Sounds to me like they want us to breach confidentiality, which is a very good reason for potentially saying no to Kong, perhaps. Let's go back and read the rest of it. Kong is a much larger company than Headford. Opportunity to offer some non-audit services as well as the audit. So now I'm thinking ethical issues. I'm thinking self-interest because of the high fees from Kong. Partly because they're big and partly because of the other services they would want us to do. But I'm also thinking other services could create self-review threats, familiarity threats, etc. Now maybe I can get around that if I use separate teams of staff, etc. And now I'm asking myself, why is this one worth 5 and the first one worth 8 when they should probably be the other way around? Loads of issues to talk about here. Can I audit Kong? Well, that conflict of interest is a big issue. I don't think you can audit both. So which one would you rather audit? Well, both of them have got integrity issues. One, because they blow up children, and one, because they've deliberately targeted our firm, I'm guessing, in the hope of finding out stuff about the other company. I would be tempted to suggest, therefore, that the conclusion is that it might be best to audit neither because of integrity of client issues. But if you're going to audit one, maybe you could resign from Headford because the integrity of client issues there are known, whereas with Kong it might be coincidence that they've come to you. So it might be tempting to resign from Headford and accept Kong, but we'd have to use different staff because staff who've already been to Headford know stuff and might be at risk of passing it on to Kong. Notice that all the way through that I was planning the answer, showing you the points I'd want to talk about, I kept saying because, to explain the points. And if you're writing these out, you need to explain them. Now, because we cannot write out full answers much on revision because we've got limited amounts of time, what I'm going to do is supply you with written formal answers for each of the questions that we do during the class. Okay? So you will get that. I have got those, I think, all already written, so I think that's not a problem. So I will get that done, and after each revision class I will get that uploaded. Okay, so you will have access to full written answers, so that when, as we've just done, I do a detailed plan, not the full thing, and when I do only part of an answer, you get the whole thing. Ouch. Of course, you also have access to the examiner's answers, and the examiner's answers will be fine, except potentially for two things. One, she is a bit stuck because she has to use technical language, whereas I try to explain things in normal English to make your lives easier. And secondly, of course, her answers are going to be very long because she has to put every possible point into the answer. Two questions. Have we considered date in answering the last question, as in, can we realistically turn down the current audit now? Well, their year has not finished yet, so there's still time for a new audit firm to come in. But to be honest, that's not the point. If you are resigning on ethical grounds because your client's honesty and integrity are in question, you're free to go whenever you like. You don't have to work with crooks just because it's inconvenient for them. So interesting question, but if you're leaving because of ethical issues, if it's severe enough, yes, you can. Abel, is our objectivity in question if we leave Headford for another client that offers us more money? If all you're doing it for is the money because the fees are high, well, whether you're leaving another client or not, if the fees are more than 10, 15% of your total firm's fees, yes, as long as they're below that sort of range, you should be okay. Claire, great, as my answers don't always look like the examiner's. Claire, neither do mine. No one's will. The whole point with written answers is this. Part A of that question is technical. As such, most people's answers will look fairly similar. And if your answer to part A of this question on competence due care looks totally different, then I would be worried. But in any of the practical questions like part B, everyone explains things in different ways. Now, I'd hope that you would spot that there are confidentiality issues with the exploding toys. I hope you would spot conflict of interest in the second story. I hope you would spot big client wanting audit and other services, creating self-interest. So as long as you're talking about the right sort of issues, not necessarily all of them, but you're hitting on enough of the main themes, it then comes down not to whether you've got the same explanation as the examiner, but as to whether your explanation makes your point clearly enough. It doesn't have to be the same words. Good. Now we've reached 8:29. You'll notice we're not doing much technical revision on this first session, largely because I spend the beginning of the first session doing so much reminding you about technique and how we're going to run the course. We're going to finish off tonight by looking at one more exam question, but only part of it. Third one of the evening. This is December 2010. Again, it's question number 4. What a surprise. As we have seen, question 4 is frequently ethics, professional issues, practice management type of stuff. Yet again, we will start with the requirements. It says, evaluate each of the suggestions made. Well, to evaluate is to assess the value of, in other words, we are looking for pluses and minuses, advantages and disadvantages of the suggestions made above. Commenting on, oh look, it's ethical, professional again. So yet again with ethical we will be looking for threats to objectivity, conflicts of interest, integrity of client, confidentiality. Professional, we will be looking at money laundering, liability, practice management issues, anything that might affect our audit. Part B seems to have its own story, suggesting that we don't have to answer Part B. Suggesting we can answer Part A without reading what Part B wants as well. And in fact, I'm not going to answer Part B in this class. And the reason I'm not going to is that this was the current issues question in December 2010. And having been the current issues question once, it is fairly unlikely that it will come up again. You might not think so soon, but 4 years is relatively soon. Basically, because of the banking crisis we had, you know, Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, Northern Rock, all the various banks collapsing, people started to question the audit of those banks, and people started to question whether auditors were spending too long at clients, too many years in a row. Bear in mind we've just had another example of that with Tesco's, as Tesco's have been audited by PwC since 1983, 31 years in a row. And there was much discussion at the time as to how long audit firms maybe should be at clients, and also maybe there should be compulsory rotation of firms, so it shouldn't be up to companies. They should be forced to change auditors every few years. Now, it's not worth a huge amount of marks, Part B, but as I said, it's the current issue of that time. I don't think it's particularly difficult, to be honest, and you will be seeing an answer to it anyway. I suspect there is a fairly strong chance that Tesco's are about to change their auditors. Maybe after 31 years and a disaster worth £263 million worth of overstated revenues, I think this might be a good time. But anyway, we'll worry about Tesco's another time. Let's go look at Part A. Now, there's a specific reason I want to do Part A, and that is that the first of the two issues to deal with is an advert. And advertising has not come up for a while, which makes me believe that maybe it might be coming up for you. Now, I'm not convinced the examiner will ever examine this very frequently because every question she ever sets on it is the same. So if it is coming up, it will probably look a bit like this. So let's focus on A part 1. If we have time, we'll look at A2 as well. But to be honest, A part 2 is very similar to what we've been doing in the other questions tonight. You are a manager in Neeson and Co. A firm of chartered certified accountants, 3 offices, 12 partners. Why are they telling you how big your audit firm is? Once they give you specific information about your firm, log it in your head, because if that information's there, it's probably there for a reason. About 1/3 of the firm's clients are audit clients. The remainder are clients for whom Neeson & Co. performs tax, accounting and business advisory. Again, specific information. You have audit clients, and you have a lot of clients who don't get an audit, which is telling me that in my answer, I might want to consider looking at those 2 groups of clients separately. The firm is considering how to generate more revenue, and you have been asked to evaluate 2 suggestions made by the firm's business development manager. So, does this look like a good idea or not? We're looking to get more revenue, so you've got to ask yourself, would it work commercially? Practice management, yes? Whilst at the same time, as the question says, ethical and professional issues, we need to keep thinking threats to objectivity, SAFEM, integrity of client, conflicts of interest, etc., etc. Okay, here we go. Suggestion number 1, an advertisement. Now, whenever I see an advertisement, here's what I'm thinking. How many marks is this before we go any further? Ooh, 8. I'm going to try and say 8 separate things. When I see adverts, I remember a little list that we covered during the course. I need to look for things like there must be no unsubstantiated, unproven in other words, unsubstantiated claims. We must not say anything bad, say no bad things about our competitors. We must always be clear. We must say nothing that appears to be illegal or unethical or unprofessional. So anything that sounds a bit dodgy, if you like. We've got to be careful the use of ACCA's name. And those are a few of the things that I would be looking at too. Discredit the profession, unprofessional, same thing. So those are the sort of things I'll be looking for. Hopefully I'll find them anyway, but when I explain them in my answer, those are the sort of words I want to use. So let's go read this advert. One more thing, by the way, you could say is that because the question says practice management or says professional issues includes practice management, we should also look at the commerciality of this advert. Will the advert be likely to work? Because if it's not going to work, what's the point? Right, let's go read it then. Here we go. Neeson is the largest. Well, that's a claim. And most professional. That's a claim. Accountancy and audit provider in the country. We offer a range of services in addition to audit which are guaranteed. That's a claim. To improve your business efficiency and save you tax. Save you tax. We guarantee to save you tax. That could start to suggest unethical behaviour. Well, there's 4. If you are unhappy with your auditors, that is suggesting other firms are bad. It's implying that auditors are sometimes not very good. You can't say that. We can offer a second opinion. Ooh, that is going to create SAFEM issues, as we'll see in a minute, on the report that has been given. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 more and we're there. For all new clients, we offer a 25% discount. Well, that's lowballing, selling your services below normal levels, and that causes potential quality issues. When both audit and tax services are provided, that creates a potential self-review threat, because tax will be in the financial statements that you then audit. There's 8. Our rates are approved by ACCA. Well, that's rubbish, because the ACCA does not approve anyone's rates, and you are suggesting some sort of rubber stamp by the ACCA that does not exist. You're using their brand to try and sell your products. Naughty, naughty. Well, I can spot 9, which means there's at least 8, which means this is not difficult, as long as you can spot them and then explain them. And there's still one other issue I've not noticed, which is where this advert would go. National newspapers to attract new clients. Well, I'm tempted to say that's good if it's in the business pages where company directors are likely to be looking. I'd be a little bit nervous and say national newspapers will be expensive to advertise in, and surely the vast majority of people reading them aren't interested in buying audit and tax services. I might be tempted to say, why not advertise somewhere more specific, like Company Director magazine, maybe The Economist, accountancy magazines, national newspapers, a little bit general. And there you go, there's my answer. Neeson is the largest. Well, at least that is a claim that should be possible to substantiate, but there's nothing in the advert proving they are the largest. And hang on a minute, don't we know something about our firm? 3 offices and 12 partners, and you're claiming to be the largest in the country with 12 partners. Have you got any idea how many partners Deloitte, Ernst & Young, etc. have got? We're talking thousands. So it sounds to me like unless these people are on an island somewhere where they're the only firm, realistically, this is not true. Most professional, I don't see how you can ever say that, because how would you ever prove you're the most professional? Largest is a fact. It could be substantiated. I don't think you can ever substantiate the word professional. Professional is an opinion. Now what I hope is you're looking at that and going, yeah, that doesn't look that difficult, does it? And what's lovely about it is that whenever she does an advert question, she tends to set the same sort of things in the advert, because there's a limit to how much she can do. So as long as you have learned the various things to look out for, don't criticise other auditors, no unsubstantiated claims, they're being fairly clear, which is good. Don't suggest things that might make people get a bit nervous about your ethics. These questions tend to be relatively easy. Just coming down here, second opinion. Whoops. Remember, the issues with second opinions are you are criticising the opinion of another firm. And apart from the fact you shouldn't do that in an advert, secondly, your opinion might be wrong because you won't have the full client knowledge that their auditors will have. And that's not good news, because if your opinion might be wrong, that creates another professional issue, which is you could get sued. And secondly, your opinion could be used to intimidate their auditors. So you give an opinion based on limited information. Your opinion may well be wrong, but they then take that and go and tell their auditors they're wrong when their auditors are right. So you are assisting in a crime. You are helping a company intimidate its auditors. You are allowed to give second opinions, but if you're going to do so, you need to make sure you get all the relevant information, and you need to warn whoever gave their first opinion that you are giving an alternative. The easiest way to deal with that is refuse to give a second opinion unless you are allowed to contact their existing auditors first. Whew. Well, we've had an intensive second half to this evening, finishing one question, doing another question, doing another question. But sometimes doing them back to back helps to prove the point. Now, I'm not going to go through the second one in any detail, part 2, but let's just have a quick look. New partner with experience in the banking sector has joined Neeson. It's been suggested the partner could specialise in offering a corporate finance service to clients. Does this not sound like one of the other questions we did, where it was staff recruitment? We have one person who knows how to do it, so let's offer it. Well, rather like the recruitment question from earlier, you have to ask the question, would clients want the service? Well, I don't know. Would they? What's the service? In particular, the partner could advise clients on raising debt finance and negotiate with the bank on behalf of the client. Would you like someone to go to a bank and negotiate on your behalf to raise money? Yes. Of course this would sell. Raising money without having to do it yourself sounds like a very nice service to pay for. So commercially, makes a lot of sense. But if this guy goes and raises money for clients, the words on behalf of the client should be telling you advocacy threat. You're on the side of the client. And then, of course, don't forget that this finance will be in the financial statements you audit, creating self-review threat. But hang on, I seem to remember that 1/3 of our clients are audit clients and 2/3 are not. So one fairly simple solution to all of this is to offer this service to your non-audit clients, of whom there are lots, but don't offer it to audit clients. And if you come up with those 3 points in themselves, advocacy, self-review, so don't offer it to the audit clients, offer it to everybody else, and say, I bet this would be very commercial, you've earned 4 of your 5 marks in the space of 30 seconds of thinking time. It's not that difficult. Yes, there are lots of issues, but the lots of issues all keep falling under the same banners. And that's why with ethical professional practice management, you must always ask yourself, Safim, integrity of client, conflict of interest, confidentiality issues, liability, will I get sued? Any money laundering issues? Not in this question, I suspect. Practice management issues? Well, you've clearly got the competency to offer the service because this guy's an expert. Good. Impact on the audit. Well, if this guy goes and negotiates on behalf of your firm, the impact might be that for that client you can no longer do their audit because of the threats created. Okay. Well, good to see, as we get through our first class, lots of conversation, debate, of people throwing in some thoughts, sometimes questioning what I'm saying, sometimes agreeing with it, and I'd encourage all of you to do that. What you need to do is review the questions we've been looking at tonight. Don't worry too much about the individual technical points. Firstly, focus on how I went about doing them. Now that is it for tonight's class. That is 2 3/4 hours of fun. Please bear in mind, we've not had too many debits and credits tonight. On Friday, risk. and some audit procedures, which means debits, credits, accounting knowledge is going to start becoming a fairly big issue. So if you're a bit worried about your accounting standards, maybe before Friday, worth a look. Just a repeat of what I said at the beginning, exam tips are already up. The remaining progress test questions, also a bit of extra useful practice, also about to go up. Study planner for this revision course, done, about to go up. Must, should, could list, done, about to go up. So the next 24 hours or so, we will see a lot of stuff being uploaded. Audit standards done. If not already uploaded, will be uploaded tomorrow. I will see you on Friday. Thank you all very much for participating. And I hope I feel better as well. Thank you. Good night.